Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin, and we are the Dungeon Dudes.
Welcome to our 2024 Cleric Class Guide for Dungeons & Dragons 5e.
We'll be taking an in-depth look at all the class features, ability scores, spells, subclasses, and build options to help you build a cleric for your next D&D campaign. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
Clerics are the champions of the gods. Wielders of divine power, they take to a life of adventure to spread the word of their god or carry out a holy mission, whether one handed down from their faith or one that is guided by prophecies, mysteries, or their religion.
Clerics are full spellcasters, and they can lend themselves well to a support role, or they can expand on that by becoming excellent healers. They can even make amazing blasters, or they can even wade into the front lines of combat with armor and weapons. There's a lot of roles that a cleric can fill in the party, primarily being a support character, and today we're going to discuss all of the options available to them and a few of the build ideas that we have.
Now, you could consider one of the following classic archetypes if you're building a cleric for the very first time. The first being the classic warrior priest. This is a cleric who dons heavy armor, takes up martial weapons, and wades into the fray where they can support their allies and smite their foes.
Or you could be a healer who channels the power of the gods to support their allies in battle and mend their wounds.
But cleric spellcasting can be surprisingly potent and unleash holy wrath upon your foes using it. This would enable you to play more of a blaster build.
There are many other possibilities for the types of role that a cleric can fill and a lot of different support options that they can represent. However, you can also mix and match a lot of these together. You don't need to define yourself by one simple archetype. There's a lot of diversity that comes with the array of gods and religions present in the multiverse of D&D, but these archetypes are worth considering if you're playing a cleric for the very first time.
So in our guide today, we're going to be focusing on the options presented in the 2024 Player's Handbook. Talk to your Dungeon Master, though, if other books and other player options, whether from first party or from third party source books, are available when you're building your cleric. But today we're just going to focus on the core options available in the PHB. Opening up to the cleric core traits, let's see what every cleric gets.
Their primary ability is going to be wisdom because they are a wisdom-based spellcaster. Their hit point die is a D8, and they get proficiency in wisdom and charisma saving throws. When you're building your cleric, you get to choose 2 skill proficiencies from the list of history, insight, medicine, persuasion, or religion, and they get proficiency in simple weapons, light armor, medium armor, and shields.
Overall, clerics are not too great at using skills. They can be really good with the wisdom-based skills like insight and perception. Medicine can be handy to pack along, although their spellcasting often supersedes the capability of what you can do with the medicine skill. And sometimes clerics can be useful sources of knowledge, wisdom, and sometimes can be the party face. They are tough, having a D8 hit die, but not as tough as fighters. They do get some decent armor proficiencies, and there's options to expand that. But overall, clerics, unless you build your cleric to be on the front lines, you're going to be a little bit on the squishier side. Overall, not quite as squishy as a wizard, but not nearly as tough as a fighter or barbarian.
When we look at the cleric class features, the first option that they're going to be presented with is their spellcasting feature. This is important since they are primary spellcasters. It's a first level feature, and you begin with 3 cantrips and 2 first level spell slots. Eventually, you're going to gain access to 9th level spells.
Wisdom is both the primary ability for the cleric class because it is the ability score that powers your spellcasting. So your wisdom is going to be used to determine your spell saving throw DC, which is calculated as 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your wisdom modifier. The saving throw DC is used when you cast offensive spells on your enemies, such as Flame Strike to damage them or Banishment to send fiends back to hell. They have to beat your saving throw DC or the spell affects them. This is also used for your spell attack bonus, which is just your proficiency bonus plus your wisdom modifier. And this is used when you're making a spell attack, like throwing a guiding bolt at an enemy or swinging at them with your spiritual weapon. Your wisdom also comes into play occasionally for certain healing spells. So many healing spells will you'll add your wisdom modifier to the amount of healing that you restore with that spell. So it's very important to have a good wisdom score with a cleric.
The cleric features table, which is on page 70 of the player's handbook, shows how many spell slots and spells prepared you have at each level. You're going to regain all of your spell slots on a long rest, and clerics have the unique option of being able to change their prepared spells after any long rest.
In addition to the spells that you get to choose and prepare, your cleric subclass at level 3 is going to grant you additional spells prepared of every level from first level spells to 5th level spells. These bonus spells don't count against the number of spells you can prepare. So you always get basically 2 spells per level from level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you get to pick whatever else you want from there. This really means that you have a pretty big pool of spells that you can choose from, and we'll get a little bit more into what you may want to prepare in a bit. But the bottom line of this is that this is incredible flexibility, because you get to choose anything on the cleric spell list every time you prepare your spells. So if you don't like a spell that you used the day before, don't prepare it again. If you want to try out different spells on different days, or if you know the adventure ahead is going to be really tough, you want to bring that extra healing. If you know that there's going to be fiends and you want to banish them, if you know that you're going to need some sort of niche spell like Create or Destroy Water because you're going into the desert, you can pack along the right spell for the occasion.
I think that this is really valuable for brand new players looking to try out spellcasting. I think the cleric is one of the best entry points for a new player who wants to be a spellcaster. A lot of players who are unfamiliar with the vast array of spells that they have at their disposal might not quite know what their style of spellcasting is. Do you prefer to be a support character? Do you like to blow things up with devastating damage spells? Do you like to control the battlefield or heal? Or all of these options are available to clerics, and you get to dabble with what you want to try at which point. Perhaps there's a few spells that you pick up thinking they sound pretty cool on paper, but in play you just find that it doesn't suit your style and it's not really coming up as much as you wanted it to. Well, on your next long rest, drop them and try out something new. I also think for experienced players, this is extremely beneficial because, as Monty said, that foresight into knowing what your next adventure is allows you to prepare the appropriate Swiss Army knife of options to bring into the battle the next day, depending on the locations you're traveling to, the party members you're traveling with, or maybe even the type of monsters that you expect to fight. You might want to prepare a different group of spells based on that information.
The cleric spell list also has some overlap with other characters' spell lists, as well as a bunch of niche spells that are handy to pack along, but might not come up that day. A great example of this are spells like Remove Curse. You might go several adventures before you encounter a curse, and when you do, if you didn't prepare it, well, you can prepare it the next day, so that you can then deal with that problem the next day. Obviously, if it's an emergency situation, clerics actually have an interesting solution for that we'll talk about shortly. But it does mean that if you run into a problem, you can be like, well, hey, everybody, I can't deal with this today, but if I take a rest, I can deal with it tomorrow.
I like to imagine thematically that the cleric has the solution. They just need to go pray to their god, prepare, like they like lock themselves in the room with like candles and all of that, and they're like praying to their god to like channel the divine power to solve the issue. You can role play it out like that. It's not, I prefer that instead of I need to go take a nap and then I'll be able to handle it.
Another great thing are there's a lot of divination spells as well that, like, if you know you're going on an adventure the next day, the day before you set out to the dungeon, you prepare the divination spells and use them to commune with the gods, but then you actually don't prepare those spells again because you don't need them on the day. Yeah.
Also at first level, you're going to gain Divine Order, which gives you a choice of 2 options, either the Protector or the Thaumaturge. The Protector is going to be great for the Battle Priest because it allows you to have proficiency in martial weapons and heavy armor, where the Thaumaturge is going to gain additional cantrips, plus you can add your Wisdom modifier to Arcana and Religion checks. perfect for the healers and blasters.
Now, at second level, you get a really transformative feature as a cleric, Channel Divinity. This allows you to tap into the power of the gods to activate a special power. And every time you do, you get to choose a different effect. 2 of them are available to all clerics, whereas your third option, and in some cases fourth, is granted to you by your subclass. So all clerics have the ability to use Divine Spark, which allows them to use Channel Divinity to either heal or damage an enemy, and the amount that they heal or damage does increase as you level up. Or you get the option to turn undead, which is that classic, like, present your holy symbol and back creatures of darkness. And the undead have to make saving throws, or they are frightened and incapacitated, which means they cannot move towards you. They can't take actions. They can basically just run away from you. If you damage them, it ends the effect. But the only thing is that at higher levels, you get Seer Undead, which does damage them as part of turning them, which is... this shuts down encounters with undead single-handedly.
Yeah. Your cleric subclasses will also grant you an additional option here, sometimes even 2. Each cleric subclass has a bespoke channel divinity that is thematic to the genre or style or theme of that subclass. You have 2 uses of channel divinity, and you gain more uses of channel divinity as you gain levels. You're going to regain 1 use on a short rest, and you regain all uses on a long rest. This means that you are likely to have at least a use of Channel Divinity readily available for almost any combat encounter. On average, at our table, we go through 2 to 3 combat encounters before we get a short rest, usually only about 4 or 5 before we get a long rest. So with that, you will likely be able to use a Channel Divinity most combat encounters. And I think when you look at the options for Channel Divinities, Turn Undead, the Divine Spark, or the bespoke options for the subclasses, these are all very iconic features that when they are needed, they are very impactful. But you don't want to blow your Channel Divinity when it's not going to be impactful. This is sort of an ability that, although it defines the cleric, you want to make sure that you read it carefully and think of the situations in your head that are going to be best for you to use it. If you're fighting a single ghoul, you might not need to blow your Channel Divinity on Turn Undead. But if you have 20 ghouls pouring out of a crypt towards you, that's the perfect time to use Turn Undead and save the day and allow you and your friends to flee from 20 ghouls.
That said, if you haven't used any of your Channel Divinity uses and you're about to take a short rest, it is worthwhile to use one up on Divine Spark just to heal or top up an ally, because you're going to get your use back. So if you ever do find yourself in that situation, that's kind of a useful way to just get something out of it if you've been kind of stingy using it. Not every encounter will always present the perfect opportunity to use it, although, as we'll talk about, certain cleric subclasses kind of want to use their Channel Divinity power all the time. So because the subclass specific ones are really, really strong.
As usual, at 4th level, every class gains an ability score improvement. Clerics gain ability score improvements at 4th, 8th, 12th, and 16th level, and they're going to gain an epic boon feat at 19th level.
We'll be talking about our specific recommendations for feats and ability scores shortly, but clerics often do have to juggle between boosting their wisdom and wanting to have a good constitution. There's a couple really tempting feats that you're going to want along the way. Warrior priests in particular sometimes want to boost their strength a little bit more as well. So it can very quickly, you can use these up, just boosting your ability scores as a cleric.
At 7th level, you gain Blessed Strikes. You have another choice to make here between Divine Strike, which adds 1d8 necrotic or radiant damage to your weapon damage once per turn, which is going to be perfect for the Warrior Priest, or Potent Spellcasting, which allows you to add your Wisdom modifier to cleric cantrip damage. Great for the Blaster. Healer could go either way.
This also gets upgraded at level 14 with just a little bit more damage and more flexibility. At level 10, though, which is then upgraded at level 20, clerics get their big Divine Intervention feature. This allows them to cast any spell of 5th level or lower as a magic action, as long as that cleric spell doesn't have a casting time of a reaction. The spell is cast as one action instead of its normal casting time, and you don't have to have any material components for it. This is really cool because this allows you to cast a spell like Raise Dead, which normally requires a 500 GP time and 1 hour to cast right away. So if one of your party members just gets geeked in the first round of combat and dies outright, and for some reason you don't have Revivify around, and you don't have any material components, Divine Intervention, bring them back to life.
I personally think that this is excellent. Revivify, Raise Dead, any spell that has material components or a long casting time, this is an easy way to access that spell. The other great thing is that clerics, like we said earlier, have a lot of spells that are relatively niche. When you need them, you wish you had them, but you don't often prepare them. And if you find yourself in the circumstances where it is the perfect time for Remove Curse, or maybe it's that moment where a demon lord suddenly walks out of the dungeon and you did not see that coming and you forgot to pack Banishment, and now might be the perfect time to use Divine Intervention to let the gods banish the demon lord instead. And one thing that we all wish is that the Divine Intervention feature got better. And luckily for us, if we make it all the way to 20th level in our campaign, we can now use Greater Divine Intervention to cast Wish. Wish is one of the best spells in the game because it lets you recreate any spell in the game that is 8th level or lower. It also lets you do other shenanigans, but that's a little bit more up to you and your DM's interpretation. Read the Wish spell carefully so that you understand what you're doing if you decide to use it in this way, but you can technically wish for anything you want within reason. Again, your DM gets a say on what's reasonable.
Yeah.
You cannot wish for the campaign to be over because that's not fun. But talk to your DM about your wishes.
Once you do invoke the power of the wish, you can't do it though again for 2d4 long rests. So use that carefully. So with all those class features in mind, let's look at how we might actually build our cleric, starting with how we will set up our ability scores. If you're going to go with the warrior priest style, in particular, if you chose the Protector Divine Order to get heavy armor and martial weapon proficiencies, this is what I would recommend. First of all, put at least a 13 in strength. This is going to let you wear heavy armor because most heavy armor has a prerequisite of at least a strength 13. And this will put you in a position to later boost your strength if you do want to go all the way to plate. Because you're going to be wearing heavy armor, your dexterity is not going to contribute to your AC, so we can leave that at 10. I do think that clerics want to have a very strong constitution score, so I would put 15 in here, and your +1 from your background is going to go here to boost this to 16. Clerics do not need intelligence for basically anything, so I don't recommend putting any points here, or put your lowest stat here if you're rolling your stats. And then for your wisdom, max this one out, put your highest stat if you're rolling, or put max point buy here to get 15 and go with a +2 bonus there. And charisma, it's nice to have a good charisma score, but it's hard to have the points there with the cleric to do it if you're doing point buy. So I just leave this at 10. What this leaves you with is, if you're going with standard backgrounds, you can get these ability score boosts with the Farmer, the Guide, the Hermit, and the Sage. And I think that these are all really good background choices for a warrior priest. Farmer's great to get you the tough origin feat, whereas the Sage is really good to get you the magic initiate wizard. This is going to come into play if you want to get a spell like True Strike so that you can use your wisdom instead of strength for making those melee attacks. So I really like that layout for the warrior priest.
For the healer or the blaster, we're going to arrange our ability scores a little bit differently. We're not going to worry so much about strength because we are going to be focusing on medium or light armor, meaning that our strength can actually be one of our lowest stats at 8. Dexterity, however, is going to be important for our AC and dodging all of those horrible things like fireballs. So Dexterity 14 is where I would put it if I was doing point buy. Constitution, always going to be important for maintaining your concentration on spells and also for your hit points. So 15, we're going to put our +1 from our background here. Again, intelligence, don't need to worry about it, so 8. Wisdom, again, is going to be your highest stat, so we're going to put 15 for point buy with our +2 from our background. And charisma, Monty already said it, we're leaving this at 10. The same standard backgrounds apply here because we actually want the +1 and the +2 in the same place. So the farmer, the guide, the hermit, or the sage. Interestingly enough, you can choose the guide if you want to go with magic initiate again, but this time druid if you're looking for a more naturey vibe for your cleric. Or you can take the hermit, which actually gives you the healer feat. This is going to be perfect for those of us who want to play the healer archetype.
When it comes to species, clerics can be found amongst all of them. Of course, you might also have many species who talk about the gods that created them. But I do think that a couple stand out as pretty classic archetypes for clerics. In particular, the Aasimar, literally having the celestial origin.
Absolutely.
You are the divine representative. I also think that the dwarf cleric, there is something about the dwarf cleric is again really classic. I think that dwarves have this big focus on community and faith and a little bit of distrust for arcane magic, but the divine magic feels very natural for them.
I don't have much to add because those are absolutely my two favorite options for a cleric. I do think obviously going classic human cleric or really any of these work. I do like the juxtaposition of having a tiefling cleric. Yeah. It's a little bit like you fought against your inherently maybe fiendish or fayish bloodline to speak to the gods to find your path.
I think that halfling and tieflings can be really cool for trickery clerics.
Yeah.
Because, it's easy to always think of the gods as being like the holy holy healers and community focus, but sometimes there's gods of magic and there's evil gods and there's gods of trickery and there's gods of varying beliefs. And so the gods are just as diverse as the species that inhabit the worlds of D&D. And so sometimes you get this beautiful pairing, like again, the Aasimar and the Aasimar life cleric or the dwarf war cleric or the orc war cleric all fit really well. The halfling trickery cleric fits really well. But then sometimes you get this juxtaposition of like, well, what is the Goliath light domain cleric?
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that you can actually take the species and sort of tap into what their relationship with the gods look like. It's one of my favorite things in fantasy is the way that the dwarves commune with like their gods feels so much different than the way a human does.
Yeah.
And I imagine that Goliaths and orcs and tieflings all have very different ways of the way that the gods represent themselves to them. And so getting to play with that is one of the exciting parts about choosing a cleric.
Yeah, you could also do a Dragonborn that follows Bahamut or Tiamat. Gnomes are the ones that always strike me as like the oddity.
The mechanist.
Oh yeah, yes, of Gond. Yes, gnomes that worship like gods of like machine gods.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good. So good. So as we come to feats for our cleric, for the warrior priest, I think that the two that you really want to get for your origin feat are either magic initiate or tough. I think magic initiate wizard is really good for the warrior priest cleric because you get 2 wizard cantrips that you can now use your wisdom for, and one of those cantrips can therefore be be True Strike. Clerics don't get extra attack, so you can just use True Strike to attack using your wisdom with your weapon, get the bonus dice from your blessed strikes, and it's all there. You could also go the druid route of getting Shillelagh, which will let you boost up a quarterstaff or a club with your wisdom and attack with that instead. So I think that either of these are great if you actually do want to wade into melee with the warrior priest. The other option is to go with tough and to just be like super tanky with lots of hit points. For general feats, I think every cleric should take Warcaster at level 4 and just not look back. Clerics have amazing concentration spells, so you really want the advantage from concentration, and boosting your wisdom right away at level 4 is great. Beyond this, you might want to go with Heavy Armor Master, Weapon Master to get access to some weapon masteries, which can be fun, or Resilient Constitution to boost your con saves even further.
When we look at the healer, the origin feat that you're going to want to try to grasp, this might take a little bit of nuance with your background choice. The healer origin feat is available for the hermit, or you could go with something like the musician if you want to be a little bit more interesting. For the general feats, again, we are looking at warcaster for all clerics, but also the healer makes a good pillar of the party. They're a good sort of, maybe not the party face. They might not do all the talking, but they are an inspiration to their comrades. And so inspiring leader, because inspiring leader allows you to use your wisdom to give temporary hit points to your party. So that can be really helpful there. Telepathic might also be an interesting choice for the healer, allowing them to better communicate with their party members.
Now, for the blaster, once again, you might want to be able to get lucky or alert from a different origin than here, but Magic Initiate, once again, from the Druid or Wizard list, can give you some interesting cantrips to boost some things up, and also access to another spell to improve your toolkit. For example, with Magic Initiate Wizard, you could get Firebolt or another attack cantrip. This isn't unfortunately going to benefit from potent spellcasting, but it'll still be a decent spell to have an attack roll. I also really like for clerics using Magic Initiate Druid to get Thorn Whip, because Thorn Whip is an attack roll spell that pulls enemies towards you, and you can use this to pull enemies into things like your Spirit Guardians, which is really fun. For general feats, once again, the Blaster, get Warcaster, Spell Sniper can be pretty good, and Telekinetic, once again, clerics can often create damaging areas with their blasty spells that they concentrate on, and Telekinetic can be really cool to push your enemies into those areas, or just slide your allies around.
Now, let's start talking about the spell options available for clerics. This is probably going to be the most diverse and the most important options for your cleric. Again, you do get to change out a lot of your spells every time that you take a long rest. But first, let's talk about cantrips. There's a few different options that we have for cantrips, whether you're looking at damage dealing, support, or utility. Now, we do have our warrior priest, our healer, and our blaster, but I actually think it's important for clerics to consider having maybe one from each category, regardless of your archetype. For the damage dealing cantrips, we have options like Sacred Flame, Toll the Dead, and Word of Radiance. I'm a big fan of Toll the Dead, but I know that Sacred Flame and Word of Radiance are both pretty good too.
Yeah, I think Sacred Flame is the classic option here.
Yeah.
When it comes to support, Guidance is one of the best cantrips in the entire game. This cantrip adds 1d4 to an ally's next skill check. Basically, it's a passive buff for everybody's skill checks in the party. You do have to actively use it though, so make sure that you declare that you're using it before the skill check actually happens. But I think that Guidance is an absolute must-have, and you just take it. just take it. Yeah.
You also have the option for Resistance or Spare the Dying. I do think that Spare the Dying could be cool if you are very much pushing on the theme of being the healer. Spare the Dying can save lives. For utility, we do have Thaumaturgy, Light, and Mending. All of these are useful in the right situation. Thaumaturgy has been a lot of fun at the tables that I've seen it at. You can make your voice boom or change the color of a fire, which are the two that I actually saw in my Goblin Cave. A player had the fire glow green and then had a voice come out of the fire that yelled for the goblins to stand down. And they did. It worked. But Thaumaturgy is a lot of fun. Mending can be great support or utility for if you have a lot of broken things. If you have a lot of clumsy players who keep breaking their weapons.
Usually most of the broken things are the party members themselves, so you need other spells for that. Speaking of which, as we get into our first level spells, I think two spells that every cleric should pack, regardless of what type of cleric you're playing, are Bless and Healing Word. Bless is a fantastic buff that is going to increase the saving throws and attack rolls of 3 of your party members, and this is a perfect fallback on if you don't know what you should be concentrating on, cast Bless. You can't go wrong with it. Healing Word is a bonus action ranged heal, which is perfect for bringing your downed party members back into the battle or saving them from death's door. So I recommend every cleric should pack both of these. No questions asked.
Now, when we look at these specific archetypes, Guiding Bolt is the classic cleric blaster spell might be useful on all clerics, but especially on the blasters. Guiding Bolt is going to be one of their go-to spells. Because the warrior priest is usually going to be on the front lines, I would look at something like Inflict Wounds, which is a touch-based spell, but since they're right up there in combat, could be a good pickup. And then if you are playing the healer, Cure Wounds is a classic choice here.
For second level spells, universally speaking, I think that Cleric should bring Aid, Enhance Ability, and Lesser Restoration. Aid is going to increase all of your party members' hit point maximums when you cast it, so this is the spell that you're going to start the day off. Enhance Ability and Lesser Restoration are a little bit more situational, and you might not cast these every day, but they're handy to have around.
When it comes to our archetypes, Spiritual Weapon is a good choice for either the Blaster or the Warrior Priest. The Blaster is going to be standing back, and so having the ability to cast a spell that lets a weapon float up to their enemies and smack them might be really beneficial. And for the Warrior Priest, while they're focusing on doing combat, they can have another weapon also doing some extra damage on the side. Prayer of Healing is an excellent choice for the healer archetype and essentially lets you gather your party around, say some prayers for 10 minutes, and get the benefits of a short rest, in more or less. So it is a great spell for the healers of the party.
As we get up into our third level spells, bringing along Dispel Magic is always quite handy for emergencies, and Revivify for the really bad emergencies to bring a party member back if they died outright.
Again, your Blaster or Warrior Priest is probably going to want to grab Spirit Guardians. I especially like this on the Warrior Priest since they are going to be on the front lines. Given the fact that both Spirit Guardians and Spiritual Weapon are concentration spells, I will note that if I am a Blaster and I'm standing on the back lines and my goal is to not be in base contact with any enemies, I might rely a little bit more on Spiritual Weapon. Whereas if I am the Warrior Priest and I'm constantly surrounded by enemies, Spirit Guardians might be the best choice. Spirit Guardians allows you to surround yourself with flitting spirits that either do necrotic or radiant damage, and they damage enemies that come into the range as well as slowing them down. So you become a walking vortex of spirits that hurts anybody that's within that proximity to you. Aura of Vitality, on the other hand, is an excellent spell for a healer and can be used out of combat to do some incredible healing if you just let everybody wait around for a few minutes while you boost them all back up.
As we get into our fourth level spells, this is actually a place where you really want your domain spells to do some heavy lifting, because I think there's only two really good options here. The first is Banishment, which is a spell that simply yeets someone out of the battlefield entirely, sends them to a harmless demiplane for up to 1 minute while you're concentrating on it. But if they happen to be an extra planar creature and you concentrate on Banishment for the full minute, they're just sent back to wherever they came from.
Go back to the hell from which you came. Yeah, absolutely.
Death Ward is another interesting one because it's a passive buff that you can cast on your allies that if they're reduced to 0, they get reduced to 1 instead, and they also become resistant to like instant death type effects. So both these are pretty good options for your fourth level slot.
As we move on to fifth level, we do have a few universal options as well. Circle of Power, Raise Dead, and Greater Restoration. Circle of Power is an aura that you can create that gives advantage on saving throws to all of your allies. Raise Dead, as the name of the spell implies, allows you to raise dead. Not to be confused with necromancy spells, you're not bringing skeletons and zombies back to life, but if one of your party members dies, Raise Dead is the way to get them back. And Greater Restoration is a spell that can deal with all sorts of terrible ailments that might befall your party members. Whether they've been turned to stone or have a disease or many of the other terrible things that can happen, Greater Restoration might be worth picking up. And if you haven't picked it up, I mean, this is one that you always want in your back pocket just in case. Yeah, if a party member turns to stone, you got to deal with that. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Also at fifth level, the Blaster can bring Flame Strike, which is the holy fireball, basically. It's radiant and fire damage. It's a great just damaging AoE. The warrior priest might want to summon a celestial, which summons an angel that can fight in a variety of ways alongside you in battle. And the healer might just be happy with mass cure wounds to heal a whole bunch of party members all at once. As we move on to level 6, two spells that really stand out here is, first of all, heal. This is as befits the name, it is a super heal. It both restores hit points and gets rid of status effects. It's a great way to just bring someone really back into the fight seriously. But I think the big standout for 6th level is Hero's Feast. This is a buff spell that you're going to cast the night before the adventure. Everyone's going to eat the big feast, and they're going to get a bunch of resistances and bonus hit points from doing so. So the gods provide a bounty.
Now, I think both of those universal spells kind of take what the healer's going to want to be focusing on anyway. But as we look at the blaster and the warrior priest, the blaster might want to check out Sunbeam. It's a great spell that allows you to fire a beam of radiant energy at an enemy or a line of enemies, and then on subsequent turns you can use your action to fire another beam. So one casting of a spell can create multiple beams. If you keep lining up your enemies, you can deal a lot of damage. Blade Barrier is great for the warrior priest. Blade Barrier summons a wall of spinning blades that can harm your enemies. Blade Barrier can be great, especially if you have ways of shoving enemies into your Blade Barrier, then it's even better. So create a wall of swords and throw your enemies into it.
As we get into the really high level spell slots here, at 7th level, Conjure Celestial is incredible. This spell basically creates a column of divine light that simultaneously damages your enemies and heals your allies. It's amazing. Resurrection is your upgraded way of bringing party members back to life. What's great about Resurrection is you don't need the whole body. You could just resurrect someone from a fingernail.
Yeah, we're talking Deadpool level resurrection here. For the archetypes, Firestorm is great for blasters. You thought a regular storm was bad, now make it out of fire. It does basically what it says. It's a ton of damage, fiery damage. Divine Word for the warrior priest. Divine Word is a bonus action spell that can strike your enemies dead and send fiends back to hell where they belong. And then Power Word Fortify for the healer. This spell allows you to take a large amount of temporary hit points and either divvy them up amongst the party, or if you have somebody like your frontline barbarian or something like that, you can just pile it all on one person and let them run into the fray without the fear of death.
At 8th level, Holy Aura is amazing. This gives all of your allies in an emanation around you advantage on saving throws and a disadvantage on attack rolls for enemies that are attacking them. Otherwise, you might just want to shut off magic entirely with Anti-Magic Field. It's a short area, but if you're going up against spellcasters, this can be the bane of their existence.
And finally, at 9th level, you have some amazing staples like Gate. Now, if you're having a combat encounter and you want to invite some angels to the party, you can open up a gate to heaven and have them pour out. Mass Heal or Power Word Heal are also great choices here. I think Mass Heal is the better option.
I think generally you want to heal more people than one person for a ton, but I like Mass Heal better. It's pick your favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are for everybody. Gate, heal. Gate or heal. Invite some angels, heal your party members. So that kind of covers all of these spells. There's a lot of other options to choose from. And of course, all of the ones that we went over doesn't cover all of the possibilities for how you want to build your character or what might be right, like we said before, for the adventures you go on, the party makeup, the different enemies that you're facing. So take a look at all of the incredible cleric spells at your disposal, and every time you take a long rest, you might want to swap out some of these and bring the right spell to the party.
These are just some of our go-to recommendations for ones you might want to try out first, but always there's niche options that might be more powerful based on the adventure you're going on. Moving along, let's take a look at the subclasses that we can choose from for our cleric. First up is the classic life domain. This is the premier choice if you really are committed to playing the healer. The domain spells are going to give you all the essential healing spells, freeing up your spell slots and preparations for the utility or the just-in-case spells instead, because the domain basically gives you all those really good healing spells that we just talked about, always prepared.
We also have some amazing features like Disciple of Life, which greatly increases the potency of all of your healing spells. And you have your Channel Divinity Preserve Life, which allows you to heal all nearby bloodied creatures. Bloodied is a condition that means that they are below half their hit points. So as you can see, the Life Domain Cleric is probably the best healer in the game. So if you're playing a cleric with the idea of being a healer, then the life domain is the way to go.
Yeah. Now, if you really like the Wrath of the Gods and you want to play a blaster, you might want to consider the light domain, because here you're going to get domain spells that include powerful damage dealing spells such as Fireball, Scorching Ray, and Wall of Fire. This is a great option for the Vengeful Sun God. And really add some very powerful, hard-hitting, damage-dealing spells to your arsenal.
When it comes to the key abilities that the light domain gets, we have Warding Flare, which offers a protective reaction to impose disadvantage on attacks against you or your allies. I cannot stress enough how fun it is to tell the DM that they have to roll with disadvantage just because you said so. And so you have this ability that you can use pretty liberally, a good amount of times per day, to really throw it back at your DM during those key moments where they're about to destroy the party. You also have your Channel Divinity Radiance of Dawn, which allows you to dispel magical darkness and deal radiant damage to foes. Again, it's just a big boat of power that you get to deliver to your enemies. So the light domain is our key choice for blasters.
Next up is the Trickery domain. This is a very unique domain that is ideal for hybrid but spellcasting focused sort of builds. It brings into your arsenal a bunch of spells that are not normally on the cleric spell list for illusion, utility, and control. You get spells like Disguise Self, Hypnotic Pattern, and teleportation effects like Dimension Door, but also mind control like Dominate Person. It's a really cool and unique spell list that creates a very different feeling cleric.
Some key abilities are Blessing of the Trickster, which grants advantage on stealth checks to either you or an ally. So if the rogue's about to go in, you might want to give them the Blessing of the Trickster to let them get extra stealthy when they need to infiltrate the castle. Or you have your Channel Divinity Invoke Duplicity, which allows you to create an illusory duplicate of yourself to distract your enemies. And you can actually teleport around the battlefield, switching places with your duplicate, or it can even act as a point of origin for your spells. I always picture that moment in the first Avengers movie where Loki fools Thor into charging at him, jumping at him, but it was only a duplicate of Loki, and he goes through the duplicate and lands in the prison. It's a classic Loki trick. The Trickery Domain Cleric always reminds me of
it is the Loki build, and the Invoke Duplicity, this is an example of a Channel Divinity power where you probably want to use this every battle, because it gives you so much utility and such an interesting different play style. So if you really think that clerics are just holy rollers, try playing a Trickery domain. They're going to surprise you because they're very different from the other clerics.
Also, Loki's an excellent choice for what god you can worship.
Yeah.
When it comes to the War Domain Cleric, this is the great choice for the Warrior Priest build. You're going to get some amazing domain spells that will help you out in combat on the front lines, such as Spiritual Weapon, Crusader's Mantle, and Steel Wind Strike, all of which are excellent combat-focused spells.
War Priest is a feature that lets you make an attack as a bonus action a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, and the uses are regained on a short rest. So this actually is a way that you can attack twice per turn with the War Priest sort of build. And then your Channel Divinity powers, this actually is one that gets 2. The first Channel Divinity power actually lets you add +10 to an attack roll to yourself or an ally. But the other one, the War God's Blessing, is really cool because this lets you use Channel Divinity to cast Shield of Faith or Spiritual Weapon without using a spell slot, And when you do, you don't need to concentrate on the spell. So this is a really cool way. If you use Shield of Faith, you just get +2 AC concentration free on yourself or an ally. Or with Spiritual Weapon, you're going to have that Spiritual Weapon attacking and dealing damage to enemies. And it can be using your bonus action. And then you can also have Spirit Guardians at the same time. So you get kind of 2 concentration effects at once.
So let's talk about role-playing your cleric. Obviously, there's a large variety of ways that you can bring a cleric to life, but there's a lot of questions that you should ask yourself when you're designing your cleric to kind of decide how are they linked to the gods. That brings us to the first question. How did you choose your deity? Did you grow up in your religion, or did you discover faith later in life?
As we've said many times, there are so many different gods in the worlds of D&D, and I think that your relationship with what god you choose really gives you a lot of role playing to base things on, because the gods come with so much flavor, they come with so much mythology, and you can ask yourself, are there any sayings or hymns or myths or stories of the gods that you can tell in the form of prayers? I find that this is a great opportunity to actually look up real world mythology and real world stories and kind of real world myths about the gods to use as inspiration.
With your dedication to the gods comes the question of what are your morals, virtues, what places or objects are sacred or important to you, your religious faith, or your deity?
Think of like a trickster god that cats are sacred, right? Like maybe in your religion, all cats must be worshipped. And every time your cleric sees a cat, you have to like recite a prayer or give thanks, because cats are viewed as emissaries of your god.
And that also lends us to the next question. What sort of rituals or traditions do you hold or perform, like the worshiping the cats? There are many things that religious people do, just small things throughout the day to dedicate themselves to that religion. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it in my friends' families. And, you know, there's various ways that traditions come up in religious prayer or religious groups. So what are yours?
Yeah, it can be as simple as like lighting a candle or incense and speaking a prayer at a specific time of day.
Dinner time.
Yeah, right? Yeah, just giving thanks over dinner, right? That is there some way that manifests for your cleric? Now, on that front, your cleric could be a devout worshiper who closely follows the religious doctrine, but you don't have to be. Maybe you're someone who has found their faith in their own way and shows their reverence in your own way. There's always, with any religion, there can always be different opinions, different stories. There can be religious schisms, and there can be sometimes disagreements over the interpretation of the holy texts. And so, especially, there can be some D&D settings like Grim Hollow or Eberron where the gods are a little bit distant. And so their exact nature and behavior is a little bit more of a mystery than in, say, than in other settings where sometimes the gods just like show up and mess things up, like the Forgotten Realms, right?
I also think that it's cool to imagine a cleric. Obviously, the traditional cleric is one who was a devout worshiper of their religion, but I like the idea of a person who wasn't religious, but then experienced something, maybe a miracle, maybe a divine moment where they witnessed a sign that they couldn't deny. And in that moment, they said, they were given divine powers and were like, oh, I guess I should do something with this. So there's that sort of like, were you thrust into it or were you worshiping the whole time?
And of course, with your cleric, what do you think of other gods and religions? Sometimes there are rivalries amongst the gods. And, you can think of even like the Loki Thor, like Loki and Thor were very much frenemies, in so many ways, like best friends, but also always doing, trying to outdo one another. And so worshippers of Loki and Thor might have a similar relationship to one another. They might be the best of friends and staunch allies sometimes, but always looking to pull one over on another. More so, what does your cleric think of arcane magic and other spellcasters?
Now, nobody's perfect, and your cleric shouldn't be perfect either. And I think it's important that every character has some flaws. Within your religious ceremonies and your dedication, Have you developed any vices or dark secrets or fears or flaws? I think a character is always deeper if you give them some nuance with a flaw, perhaps because of the severity of their religious beliefs. They have dark secrets or parts of themselves that they hide from everybody else because they're afraid that they don't represent the religion properly. Think about what those might be.
And of course, you always want to ask the question, how did you meet your adventuring companions? Did they stumble into your church one day in need of help? Maybe you are worshippers of the same god. Or maybe you were sent as a missionary to their community and met them in that way, and now you've decided to work together. In that respect, another question to ask is, what holy quest has your deity or religion dispatched you on? What is expected of you as a cleric? What does your god expect of you? Do you communicate with them? And do they occasionally send you dreams or visions that guide you on your path? Or are you guided by your own beliefs?
So this has been a look at the cleric, all of their class abilities and features and spells and feats and everything that we hope that you need to build a cleric for your future games. There's a lot of versatility within this class and a lot of options beyond even the ones that we described in this video. So if you're starting out with your very first cleric, make sure to read through all the amazing spell list and all of the different options presented to you, because clerics can be a lot of fun and come to life in so many different ways. There are as many ways to play a cleric as there are gods in the world of D&D, which is a lot, and especially if you start adding in all the third-party content.
And homebrew, yeah.
Homebrew. There's a lot of them. So just have fun with it.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you found this class guide useful, consider supporting the channel by following the links in the description below.
And if you want to see how we do without a cleric at our party, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And you can check out all of our other class guides right up over here.
Please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time
in the dungeon.